So welcome everyone. My name is Tiffany Green, and I'm the founder and managing director for Emergent Inquiry Consulting. And we're extremely excited that you're able to join us today for what is our first webinar, as we're kicking off a webinar series this year around engaging with global female leaders to learn, to share, to have thought partnership in the global space. And we're extremely excited to have our first webinar and our first guest. So before I jump into introductions, just a few things just from a kind of technology perspective is if anyone is having challenges or issues or cannot hear, we'll share in a moment how you'll be able to connect with our tech support on the line. We do currently have the messages shut off so that we can really focus in on the webinar. In addition to that, you will notice that we do have cameras automatically turned off so that we can focus specifically on the conversation that we're having. And we will ask for everyone to please ensure that you're on mute. And we will share how you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and engage in further dialogue, because we do want to make sure that this is an interactive session. You'll see on the screen right now our website and a little request to sign up for our newsletter. And the purpose for that is that this is going to be an ongoing webinar series. And so if you are interested in staying up to date on future webinars that Emergent Inquiry Consulting has, or you're interested in getting even just up to date information and new information and ideas on leadership and organization development, please do go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. We'll also put it up towards the end as well, so you can do that. So let me just quickly go to the next slide, and we'll share a little bit about how we would like for you all to interact during our webinar today before we jump in. On this slide, you're going to see just a couple of steps, and I'm going to ask for folks to just do this quickly now so that everyone is able to engage as we get into the conversation. The way that we're going to be asking folks to engage is using the Q&A functionality on Google Meet. And it's quick, easy, 3 easy steps to do that. One, the first step is that you're going to see towards the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you're on, you're going to see 3 shapes: a triangle, square, and circle, which is your activities button. We're going to ask for you all to select that activities button. And then if you have a question, you're going to go to the bottom where it says ask a question, and you'll select that button. And all you do is write in your question and you hit post. I'll explain to you how we're going to use this, but when you post a question, it's not automatically going to be seen by everyone. The questions will need to be approved by the Emergent Inquiry Consulting team, and then we will take those questions forward as needed as we go through the webinar. In addition, if you have any issues with hearing us, seeing us, anything of that nature, you can also put the request for help in that Q&A functionality as well. And we do have a great firm on the line, Monkey and River, who is supporting us with some of our technology today. And so they will respond as needed if you need any tech support. So that is going to be the process in order to kind of have a dialogue and have this an engaging session over the next hour or so together. So with that, we can go ahead and take the slides off the screen, Marcella, if you don't mind. Excellent. And let's go ahead, and I'm going to pin myself and Shalane, excellent, so that we can officially jump in and get started. So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Tiffany Green. I'm a founder and managing director of Emergent Inquiry Consulting. We are a consulting firm that focuses in on supporting organizations to be more effective and higher performing, and specifically looking at supporting organizations that have a presence and are scaling across emerging markets. And so as we have been partnering with organizations, we've had the great pleasure of working with and for the Trevor Noah Foundation, where we've engaged with Shalane Yuen, and I'm really excited to introduce her today as our first guest for our first webinar. Shalane is a mother, she's a partner, and she is the founding managing director of the Trevor Noah Foundation, which, as many of you may know, is a South African-based nonprofit organization focused on enhancing equitable access to quality education. Since founding the organization in 2018, Shalane has raised over $12 million in funding, expanded leadership training programs across Africa, and established partnerships with prestigious institutions, which she'll tell us a bit more about when we get into our session. She's based in Brooklyn, New York, after spending over a decade here in South Africa. And we're really excited to have Shalane with us today, where she's going to share more about her fascinating career journey and the leadership impact lessons that she's had along the way. So welcome, Shalane, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. How are you doing?
Good, excellent. So what we're going to do first for everyone on the call is we're going to jump into a little bit of a fireside chat. And this is just an opportunity for us to hear Shalane's story and to learn a little bit about Shalane. During the fireside chat, what I'm going to ask is if you have questions, that you put those questions in the Q&A functionality. And after the fireside chat, we will ask some of the questions that you all have put in the Q&A functionality. So I'm going to kick us off, Shalane, and ask you the first question that we'd love to hear a little bit about. And for those on the line, I know some may know you, some may not. Some may be really familiar with Trevor Noah Foundation, some may not. So I'd love if you could start off with just sharing a bit about your background, and specifically as we think about Trevor Noah's really focus on education and ensuring that there's equitable education. We'd love to understand a little bit more about your passion, right, for education reform and what got you into philanthropy, and particularly any pivotal moments in your life, that really led you to where you're at today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So as Tiffany mentioned, I'm Shalane Yuen. I was actually born in Hawaii, so I've come a long way going from Hawaii to Johannesburg. I think they're actually on the opposite ends of the earth. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I did spend a lot of time in Hawaii as my place of birth. It's also where my dad's family is from. And I think from as young as I could remember, I've always loved to volunteer. I remember my dad never really understood it because he always saw it as working for free, but I actually saw it as a way to learn for free. So I was keen to take up any volunteer opportunity. It's very active in student leadership. And I remember when I was a junior in high school, and I remember watching the tsunamis happen in Thailand. And I think that was the first time where I saw something really devastating and felt extremely helpless, because with my family living on an island in Hawaii, the story of what happened in Thailand really kind of hit home for me, right? We're also based on the Ring of Fire, could have happened to my family as well. I felt really helpless because I wanted to go and help, but I was too young. And so when I was in college, I actually took up a study abroad opportunity to go to Thailand. And I remember I was very fascinated and intrigued by this bustling city of Bangkok being so close to rural agricultural settlements right outside of the city, right? And that dichotomy of seeing bustling economic activity and poor settlements right next to each other. Something about it just didn't, I just wanted to understand more, right? I wanted to understand what systems contributed to that. How does that happen? Why does that happen? Come to find out, there are many cities around the world where that happens, right? And so going back to like how that drove my passion to be involved in education today. I actually studied economics and sociology, and then I went on to get my master's in public administration. And I kind of dedicated my career to just understanding better economic systems and how they contribute to some people having immense economic opportunity while others are left out of that system. And so I am not trained, or I didn't go to school to learn about education, but obviously all roads lead back to education, right? Because a strong education foundation is what sets a person up for economic liberty, economic freedom. And so it's from that viewpoint that I became really interested and trying to understand the connection between education and economic freedom.
I love that. Thank you, Shalane. And so I'm really curious, as you talked about, your path that you've had, and, not necessarily having that direct connection with education, but really seeing how education is integral and foundational as you think about the progression and the success of individuals and countries and economies. I'd love to talk a little bit about, how you've been able to, with your own personal identity, with your experiences from where you've grown up, been able to really step into, a different space, right? Coming into South Africa, coming into a different culture, and being able to figure out how do you really drive this? And so I'm curious, as you think about this huge privilege, right, that you've been given with being able to be the founding managing director for the Trevor Noah Foundation and bringing in your full identity, right, as a woman, as an Asian American Pacific Islander, right, with the experience that you're bringing in. What have been some of your biggest challenges as you've navigated, right, it's a really ambitious transformational goal to think about what does it take to be able to do education reform in South Africa and potentially scaling that even broader, right, across the continent of Africa. What have been those challenges, and how have you turned those challenges into successes?
Yeah, really good question, because the short answer is that it's overwhelming because of all of the things that you mentioned, right? I think from day one, it's been very overwhelming and constantly trying to reframe it as an opportunity, because I know the immense brand that we carry and represent. And with that comes a lot of expectations around what we can be doing, what we should be doing. And it's constantly about balancing those expectations, but being really realistic, because we want to be around for a long time, right? And I think with a really strong strategic focus, sometimes building strength takes time. It requires us to understand where we work, who we partner with, who we hire. Those decisions you can't make too quickly, especially if you're trying to set yourself up for long-term success, right? And so it's just about being consistent. I think that's one of the real privileges that I've had being in this role, is that I've been able to build the organization over time. And so I am able to, my job requires me to think about crisis management, short-term planning, and long-term planning all at the same time. It is overwhelming, but it's also a real blessing and privilege to be able to be in a role like this. And so, yes, it is about balancing all of these different expectations and agendas, and also trying to do right by Trevor's brand. And he is a huge role model to many in South Africa, to many around the world. And so we also want to make sure that we are carrying on his vision for what he wants for the foundation, for what he wants for young people, for what he wants for South Africa. And I do think that with that incremental growth, it's really starting to pay off. So you mentioned that I just moved back to Brooklyn And I did with my husband and my daughter. And I'm focused more now on resource mobilization, on amplifying what we do in South Africa. And now I have a really kick-ass team back in SA that manages all of our on-the-ground operations and programs. And to be able to do that has taken a lot of time and love and passion and effort, but constantly thinking about creating this really stable organization that can exist far beyond myself, hopefully beyond Trevor, and really be an organization for South Africa. But I think just going back to the point about being an Asian American woman in South Africa, because my dad is Chinese Hawaiian, my mom is Japanese American, I've never really fit in any box ever, right? I wasn't Japanese enough. I wasn't, I was Hawaiian and I'm proud of that, but I didn't really grow up in Hawaii. And so because of that, I've always been really comfortable in uncomfortable situations. I've always been comfortable not fitting in. And coming into South Africa, I think that played to my advantage because I could play two roles that I really enjoy, right? So because I kind of don't fit into any one box, I can kind of just be a fly on the wall and observe and process, and then kind of think about what's happening. And I'm kind of just an objective voice, right? And then at the same time, when I'm playing more of a front-facing role, I can genuinely speak to people and learn from them about what they're doing, what we can do together. And so both of those roles I really love to play, but because I'm not so concerned about how I'm perceived, I can really just show up as my full self. And I feel like I'm just this, maybe a bit of a blank canvas. And I think about how I play that to my strength.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. And one thing that kind of comes up for me as you're talking, Shalane, is this notion and importance of recognizing and appreciating differences, right? And it pops up for me when you are sharing that, like, you never really fit in, right? You came from your background, your household, you came from different cultures, you came from, different backgrounds. And so what did that mean for you in terms of like who you are, where you fit in, like how you were moving through the world? And I'm curious about this. As an addition to this question, a follow-up is, what do you feel like has been your biggest learning around that, around the I think it's really easy to come in with a perspective or perception when you have been around people that are similar to you and have similar views as you and have a similar culture as you for a long period of time. And sometimes it's challenging to open up that space to say, okay, how do we have some conversations to learn about something that may be different, that I may have a different perspective or I may have a view on, but I want to hear, right? I want to learn. I want to, meet folks in the middle. Like, I'm curious what your learnings have been around that, especially from a leadership perspective, and advice for folks on, how they can create that space. Because I think the fact that you took this leap to be in this role based on your experience and background just shows your ability and your comfort level with stepping into something new and different and being able to open up that space to learn from others. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit about that from you as well.
Yeah, I think I've learned over time. I'm also one of those, like, I can feel people and I can feel kind of the energy in the room. So I'm quite good at understanding how I'm being perceived without anyone saying anything, right? So first of all, I kind of usually just kind of feel the room before I know how to enter into a space. But I think one of the things I've learned over time, and my team will definitely attest to this, is I'm usually not the first person to speak. So if we are having a feedback circle, or if we're getting an opinion about, or either strategizing for an upcoming meeting or getting feedback on how a meeting went, I'll usually save my feedback for last, because I know that as the leader, right, I don't want to bias everyone else's thinking. I don't want people to think that my opinions are the correct opinions because they're coming from me. And so I'll usually wait for everyone to give feedback, and then I will also give feedback, but kind of try and touch as much as I can on, I agree with this person. I agree with this person. This thought was great, but maybe if we can think about it more, how this person. So I try and kind of incorporate what everyone else has said before me, before I speak. And so I hope that it shows that I listen and that it's not my way or the highway. And those types of thinkings I feel are very outdated, especially for Gen Z and, how people prefer to work. And so all of that is going through my mind, even when it comes down to a simple feedback session.
Mm. No, I think that's really key. And even in the work that, Emergent Inquiry Consulting has done, we've heard our clients, staff in our client organizations asking for that, right? Like it actually means something when someone of a higher level or what is perceived to be a higher level of power speaks first. It's very hard to then potentially move against that or say something different, right? Different effects. So I think that having that mindset is really key. And it leads great into this next question, Shalane, in terms of leadership lessons, right? And so I'm curious, throughout your career and throughout your journey, what have been some of the most significant leadership lessons that you've received, and how have they helped to shape the way that you guide and inspire others in your role now?
So some of the most insightful leadership insights that I've received. So I think similar to what we've been talking about, right? That quote from Maya Angelou always stays in my mind, right? That I've learned that people will forget what you've said, but they will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so I identify as an introvert. And so I am probably also adds to why I am not the first person to speak. I'd rather kind of consider everyone else's thought and then kind of add my layer or my spin on what they've said. And I'm always very mindful of, sometimes I feel leaders or managers or people in a position of power feel so impelled just to say something to fill a space, right? It's like, I must say something impactful. And sometimes it's not really those words that sticks with people. And we know now the nuances between what you say and how you say it, the nuances between tone, right? And so sometimes the right thing to say might just be, I don't know the answer, but I'll do my best to figure it out and come back to you. But it shows that they were listened to. It shows that, you took their thought into consideration. It also shows, I guess, your vulnerability as a leader, that sometimes we don't know the answers, and it's okay. So Maya Angelou's quote definitely kind of plays on repeat in my brain, and just how I interact with people and how I show up. And then obviously I have to bring Trevor into the conversation, because similarly, I think he's known for saying a lot of profound things, but what I've learned most from him is just how he behaves and how he interacts with other people. So he acts with humility, he acts with kindness, and when he engages with people, I can tell that they feel seen, heard, and valued. And I do feel that that is a real skill and intention, and it's hard to be consistent, but again, it's, he is known for what he says, and he's written books and he has a lot of content online. But I think at the end of the day, those one-on-one moments of people sitting in a show and listening to him, it's really about how they made him feel. And so, yeah, it's a skill that I continuously try to hone, but at least I try to be intentional about it.
Mm. Yeah. And that brings to mind, that saying that, like, people are not going to remember what you said. They're not going to remember what you did. They will remember how you made them feel. Right. Absolutely. And that's what's going to leave with them. And so focusing on that as a leader, I think, is a great piece of advice as we're thinking about how to make significant leadership impact. So So let's move, Shalane, into a little bit, moving into a little bit from the how you show up as a leader to the what you're doing, right, as a leader in your role as managing director. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit to us about what innovative strategies and practices you have implemented that have significantly contributed to the success that the Trevor Noah Foundation has had. And if you could highlight specifically some key initiatives or approaches, right, that have made that impact profound for the work you all are trying to achieve across the foundation.
Yeah, thanks. I just in a general approach, when we think about designing solutions, we try and be intentional about creating cross-sector partnerships, right? So ensuring that government, ourselves, corporates, and the communities that we work with are all represented in the framework of that solution. I think a good example of that is our Faranani infrastructure project, which is a initiative that we co-designed with Youth Build South Africa as the key implementing partner. We have a steering committee where ourselves plus government is represented. So, we all get monthly updates and we give government, inclusive of government, we all share the power to make key decisions and to see the project move forward. That project is also supported by other corporate funders and other international funders. So yeah, it's a huge collective of people, but I think the point is that when you have a cross-sector partnership, especially if your solutions are embedded in government, you have a higher likeliness of success that government will eventually take over that structure. So for example, it does take a while, but again, when government is bought in because they were part of driving the project forward, you definitely have a higher likeliness of success to have government take it over eventually. So I think that's one, just in terms of the way that we work. But I think also just in the spirit of being innovative, I think that one thing that we like to do as well is when we are working with a new partner, co-designing a solution with a partner, we definitely work with partners that have a core expertise, but we always try and push them a little bit further, right? So thinking about using our funding to de-risk trying something new. So for example, for Education Changemakers, which is our teacher training initiative with YALI, we are the one thematic partner that earmarks funding for grants and post-training support. And so that was my one push, is I wanted to go beyond just 4 weeks of training and make sure that we actually have funding set aside for some of those participants to implement their ideas, and we try and monitor their progress a few months afterwards. So that's kind of one shift that we've made from the standard YALI program, which I'm really proud of. But yeah, that's kind of how we like to work with partners. So let's work within your core competencies and within your core expertise. But if there's something little that we can try that's innovative together, we're happy to explore that.
And I think that's so important when you think about, like, specifically what you said around moving work to have ownership be either, whether it's going to be government ownership, whether you're moving that ownership to more proximal partners or local leadership, is to have that involvement up front. And, I think that we're just of a society in a time period that wants to move really fast. But like you said, it's like, if you're going to integrate that, right, you have to take the time to actually have that happen. And for me, that's a big ideal and need and requirement for behavior change. And that's really what we want to drive when we're thinking about any type of reform that's happening, is we're essentially trying to shift and change behavior to be able to move to a greater place. So I love that. So what I'd really like to do now, Shalane, while we have you and have this great group of participants, as you were speaking and sharing with the audience. And so if you all have questions, please throw them in the Q&A, and we'll kick off and share some of the questions that are coming in. And let me just make sure from my team, Marcella and Liz, can you all hear me okay? Just want to make sure everyone can still hear me good.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. And Shalane, can you hear me okay as well still?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's jump into the Q&A. So we have some questions. If anyone wants to put questions in, as we said in the beginning, please use the Q&A functionality, which is you're going to click on the activities icon. I'll just do a reminder. The activities icon is the icon at the bottom of your screen that has a triangle, square, and circle. And if you click on that, you will see an option that says Q&A, where you can post your question, and then the EIC team will manage the questions that are coming in. So I'll just start at the top here, Shalane. The first question is, what strategies can young leaders in small companies use to balance fresh ideas with tried and true business practices, ensuring that balance of both innovation and stability? Any thoughts or ideas on that one?
Do you want to answer that one?
You want me to go first?
No.
Okay.
But honestly, if you want to jump in, if you have insight, you're more than welcome to jump in. What strategies can young leaders in small businesses use? Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm sure a lot of organizations struggle with that, especially those that are starting up, whether to kind of hone in and become an expert in one thing before bringing in something new. And it almost feels like the same question young people ask in their careers in general, right? Do I perfect my skill set in one area, or do I kind of diversify my skills across many things? I mean, from a organizational stability point of view, I think that it is important to have some kind of core competency or traction or tested business model, but it's also not to say that that business model can't incorporate something innovative. So I guess my suggestion would be not to think of it as an either or. I don't think that a business model that has stability isn't necessary or can't necessarily be innovative. But what your business model can do is try something innovative, make sure that it's effective, make sure that it's tested, and then try and either scale it or work with other people or try and get funding. So it's not necessarily an either or, but I do think that you can still build a stable business model that that is also innovative. So maybe I'll stop there unless you have anything to add to that, Tiffany.
Yeah, I think that was you hit the nail on the head with that, Shalane. The other thing I'll mention is that we share a lot with our clients is not to be afraid to pilot new things, to test. Right. And you can still continue doing work and having that stability while you're testing and trying out like new innovative approaches and really looking at where you have that low hanging fruit, right, to do that and leveraging the skills on the team. I think the other thing that a lot of times leaders may not do that well, young or more tenured leaders, is understanding and spending the time to understand what skill set your team has outside of what they may have been brought into the organization to do. Because the thing to remember is like we are all complex humans. Right. We have, Shalane, I'm sure you have a significant skill set that, you may not even use every single day in your role now, but you have that ability to like bring in other skills. And so leveraging that, I think, could also help to balance that approach around innovation and piloting and testing with having that stability as well.
Right. Good
answer.
So,
yeah, you too. We're working well together. Okay, so let's go to our next question. And this question is from Cabello. And the question is, what leadership qualities and strategies do you believe are crucial for ensuring the long-term success and sustainability of your projects? Right. And so if you had to say, and I would say maybe we say like, what would be like the top three, Shalane, if you were like, these are the top three leadership qualities or strategies that are going to be critical to long-term success and sustainability.
Ooh. And I definitely welcome your input on this one as well. Hi, Cabello. We know Cabello well. Cabello's one of our education changemaker grantees. And I think to answer your questions, I mean, there are a lot. I think it also depends on the individual as well, on the leader. And I'm sure Tiffany would have a lot more insight on that too. But I guess if I were to give my top 3 leadership qualities, number 1 would be to be open to being wrong, and to have that ability to look back and say, oh, we didn't really plan correctly, or a theory of change was incorrect, and we need to pivot or try something else. So many businesses have failed because they were very stubborn and trying to change the business model, or trying to change their approach. And when you have an approach that doesn't work, it's eventually going to bring your business down. So just being open to saying I'm wrong. Number 2 is having a good eye for talent and being really willing to nurture your team. So as a leader, sometimes we make that shift, and I definitely went through it of it's mostly you in a very small team, and a lot of your role is kind of just cultivating a really small team and doing everything together. And then eventually your role shifts, your team gets much bigger, and your job is to nurture your greatest asset, which is your people. And so I think it's about having the willingness and the time and the passion to care about your team and your people as much as you care about the work. And then 3rd, I don't know, those are the top 2 that come to mind for me right now. But please add to my list, Tiffany, of things that you would recommend.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have the only addition that I would say, which I really think is like just adding on to your first one, Shalane, is that importance of emotional intelligence, right? And that is that, like, being okay with being wrong, being okay with being vulnerable. Maybe that's the 3rd one, right? That vulnerability, which I think you're modeling right now, Shalane, even though you may not even be aware of that, but being able to say, like, here, sometimes I don't know. Right. And I say, like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out and I'll get back to you. Right. Saying that I don't need to be the first person to have my voice in the room, even though I'm the leader. And I think that in leadership, having that level of vulnerability may be the third kind of prong or leg that I would put on to what you shared.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to highlight that those strategies have nothing to do with being able to run a business, right? I mean, it's all about intuition. It's about people. It's about learning to work with people, and I guess knowing yourself as well, right? Having huge awareness of what you are capable of and what you're not capable of, and when you need to pull in additional skills to fill gaps that you might have. We also talk a lot about being a strengths-based organization, just because I mean, think about how many times you've been in a role and, you're constantly talking about or highlighting the weaknesses that you have and how you're going to improve those weaknesses. And I just think in general, a conversation about your weaknesses is a huge, it pulls down morale, right? Think about if everyone in the organization on the same day is talking about their weaknesses. And so understanding where your strengths are and trying to pull in others who have strengths that can complement yours. I think it's huge for not just organizational morale, but just building a stronger team.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's go to the question. We have a question from Moses. And so Moses wants to know, Shalane, how has it been for you to create the right conditions to awaken and unleash the potential within people? First of all, Moses, yes, with your question. Wow. I'm feeling the depth of that. We're going to awaken. How are you awakening, right? Unleashing the potential with your people. But I think that's a great question. So love to hear any thoughts you have around that, Shalane.
I feel like I should pull someone in from my team to answer that question. So number 1, have they been awakened? I mean, I hope so. Have they been unleashed to have they been able to unleash their potential? I mean, I hope so. And I think I see the most. Photo Gang wants to speak. I am Photo Gang. But the most you can do is be, I think Tiffany froze, unless I froze. Did I freeze?
We can start over here usually. I think that's Tiffany.
Did I freeze or did Tiffany freeze?
Tiffany. I think it's
Oh,
back
okay.
now.
Hi, Tiffany. I think you froze.
Okay, yes, I did. Sorry about that.
Okay,
Can
no,
you
I
hear me
wasn't
okay
sure.
now?
Yeah, I can. I wasn't sure if it was me or not. Okay.
No. It was definitely me. So apologies. I didn't hear your whole response, but I'm sure it was me.
No. Oh no, I didn't answer. I was just joking to say I should bring someone on my team to answer this question. So I think there are like a few things that you can do. I think it's just about creating the right environment for them to feel safe to try new things. I think when you think about unleashing your potential, right, there's the conversation between what's innate in that individual to want to be better or to want to grow. And then there's also the external factors of creating a better environment for them to feel safe to get to the next level. And most times for individuals, right, we don't know what we don't know. I think I've been thinking about my journey as a young person. You know, when you are asking for new opportunities, you say you want to learn, you want to grow, but you actually don't really know what that means. You're not really sure of the skill sets that you're after, the experiences that you're after. And I think as a leader, it is important to try and place people in new experiences. And with that, sometimes things land and sometimes they don't. So one of the things I'll share is for TNF, I always say that being a leader is not reserved for senior leadership. Being a leader is not a title, but it's really a choice. And so we really push everyone to have leadership goals. We push individuals to take on leadership experiences, and that might mean different things to different people, right? So maybe a leadership goal might be to facilitate a workshop for the first time, or to attend a conference for the first time and represent TNF and network. And then maybe one up from that is to actually speak at a conference and represent TNF. So leadership goals for different individuals can mean different things, but we definitely create the space for people to try new things. So if there's a conference coming up, and even if all of senior leadership have attended that conference previously, we'll kind of tap someone else who hasn't gone to that conference before and ask them to go, right? So the idea isn't just because I'm a senior leader, these opportunities are reserved for me, but we really try and spread them around the organization. And so I can't really push people to be unleashed, and I can't push people to be their best. But again, it's that combination of, is there an innate will for them to want to get to that next level? And if there is, my job is then to create that external environment for them to be brave to try. Yeah.
That's excellent, Shalane. And I think it's so important, right? That creating that environment for them to feel comfortable, to be brave. And that's not something to be taken lightly or something that's easy to achieve. Okay, I'm going to go to our next question. We have a lot of questions in here. We may not be able to get through all of them. We have about 5 to 7 more minutes of questions. Then we want to make sure that we have time for a wrap up close. But our next question is around for someone that is starting up their own school in the community. Shalane, do you have any recommendations on how they should be thinking about fundraising?
Ooh. Yeah, I think it's a hard one. It also is very contextual, so it depends on where you are or what country you're in. I think if you're starting up a school, and school I think is a term that can be used very broadly, right? So even if you are starting up a school, or if you're getting funding for anything, right, my recommendation would be to have some kind of traction. So even if you think about the components of a school, do you have curriculum that has been tested? Have you been running after school workshops and you want to convert that to a more formal school model, for example? So I would kind of suggest to stay away from getting funding from just an idea. You can do it, but it definitely depends on your network and your social capital and some other things. And so I think I always kind of lead with evidence. So even for us, when we started, we piloted interventions that we funded ourselves. And then we used that evidence to then try and solicit funding from others. So considering your ability to self-fund and what aspects, I would try and get as much traction as possible to then use as evidence to then kind of scale up. So I would think about, Tiffany talked about pilots the other day. So what pieces of your school can you pilot? And then that kind of eventually will roll into evidence that you can use to get funding later. I answered kind of like what you would do immediately, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Thank you, Shalane. So I want to move, I'm going to jump to a question that we haven't heard you speak about yet. And so really curious to hear your perspective on this. And this is from Vera. How do you manage expectations and wish lists of potential partners or funders without bending the vision of the organization, especially when you're in a position that you really need their help?
That is a really great question. And we know Vera as well. So Vera is another education changemaker grantee based in Malawi. She's been doing really fantastic things. And so number one, to have to ask this question, Vera, it means that you're doing really well. It means that you're getting a lot of opportunities and you're not sure if you should say yes or no to. So congratulations to you. Yeah, it's a tough one, and obviously one that we battle with a lot. Look, I think it's a challenging answer because it kind of depends on your organization's needs and where you are, right? I think there might be times as a growing organization where you might have to say yes to more opportunities and try and compromise as much as possible to make it work. But I think you should understand where your boundaries are, right? Like what are requests or requirements of the potential funder that tells you to absolutely say no? Because I think the risk factor is not just shaping your vision or your mission too much, but being detrimental or hurtful to your organization's purpose in the first place. And so if you have potential partners that have a wish list, what are some of the things that you can say yes to and hopefully other things you say no to? And then I think as you become a more mature organization, it depends about power, right? So you think about who has the power in the situation. As you become a more mature organization, you might then have more power to then dictate to that partner to say, this doesn't work for us. And you might actually be able to suggest, why don't we do something in this space instead? And so, yeah, I definitely think it's about what stage you are at an organization, but the most you can do is try and compromise. And if there are pieces of the ask that are non-negotiable for you, and if they're unwilling to compromise, it is okay to walk away. I think you just have to have an abundance mindset and say there will be other opportunities out there that are better aligned to my organization's vision and mission. And if you accept opportunities that are wrong for you, you're actually taking away space from a potential partner that could be absolutely right for you. So that's also another situation that you don't want to find yourself in. But I would love to hear more about this, Vera. So I'll message you after this. We can have a chat.
Yes, more to come. It sounds like more to come. Okay, great. So I'm gonna go into one more question, and I'll just kind of squish two questions together for this, Shalane, before we move to our close. So these two questions were one from Dharma. The first one was wondering if TNF is also including quote unquote soft skills in its educational programs, such as meditation or other tools of this kind, to not just focus on the rational, informational aspects of education. And if yes, how can experts in that field connect with you? And then the second that I'll just throw into there, Shalane, so you can answer them both, from Mbasa is, how important do you believe the arts and creativity are to education, and how can artists work better with government and the private sector? So if you want to kind of take, I think both of those kind of go into the more non-traditional, what would be considered non-traditional educational systems and programs.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll answer the first one. So when TNF first started, we partnered with one school and we kind of used a consulting approach to understand what those schools' greatest needs were. And we landed on 3 areas, and then we kind of created programs with implementing partners to help us run those programs. And those three areas were psychosocial support, digital skills, and career guidance. So psychosocial support or mental wellness has always been a key pillar of the work that we do. And this was even pre-COVID, right? So as you can imagine, during COVID and post-COVID, it's become even more important. Our psychosocial support initiative is for educators. It was initially just for learners, but then we broadened it to support educators as well, especially during and after COVID. And those skills help teachers identify what secondary trauma means. So kind of just acknowledging that educators bring, or young people bring trauma into the classrooms, and that trauma, impacts educators as well. And just to kind of unpack and define what that means, and to provide them tools on how to better support themselves so that they can be better support agents for learners. So psychosocial support is something that we've always implemented. And then leadership has been a key pillar. I know this conversation is about leadership, and it's reserved not just for some people, but anyone can be a leader. We run a values-based initiative with one of our partners, Columba. That program supports principals, educators, and even the representative council of learners or student government in those schools. Leadership skills in a school is incredibly important, and thinking about capacitating some with additional leadership skills so that they can be catalysts in their schools. So those are some of the soft skills that we look at in our programs. And I think to connect with us, feel free to reach out. We'll circulate an email address that everyone can reach out to. I think the one thing to note for our Kulani Schools program is, we work with about 20 or so schools. We have a lot of partners. I think we have to prioritize what we do. And so maybe this leads into the second question of thinking about the arts. And up until now, in terms of the skill sets and support systems we are creating in schools, we haven't worked in the arts, and I'm not saying that it's not important. It's just that when you think about some of the other aspects that we're working on, foundational literacy, digital skills, career guidance, psychosocial support, these are just some of the initiatives that we've been working on for the past few years. And I just think at this point, we're just very mindful about how much more we add into those schools. We also talk about teacher fatigue and just being really thoughtful about how we introduce new elements, not to say that they're not important, but at this point we have about 7 or so initiatives that we're running in schools concurrently. So we've kind of created a really robust program. But I think in terms of the arts, right, we have Education Changemakers, which equips young educators with leadership skills. That program is for young educators who come in with some kind of idea for how they want to improve their classrooms and communities. And those ideas kind of run, they kind of vary in terms of innovative education projects that they want to implement. And some of those projects do involve the arts. I know in the past cohort, we've had educators who are using art approaches to support young people with learning differences, for example. So that is a space where we are more open to the types of educators we support. So yeah, and I think to answer your question about how artists can better work with government and the private sector, I don't really know if I know the answer to that question. I wish I did, and I hope that arts are something that we can focus more on in the future. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
A learning journey, right?
Yeah.
So I think all of these, if one person had the answers to all of them, then we would probably be even further along in the world than we are right now. And so I think we're all learning from each other, and the biggest piece of support, I think, and guidance for all of us is to continue to have these spaces of thought partnership. And this is where it's important to, get ideas of what could be, and, what could be practiced, what could be piloted, what could look different. Since we are coming up on time, we have about 3 minutes left. Shalane, first of all, I want to thank you so much for your time and for joining us, which I know is, earlier morning for you. Would love just to hear any last key takeaway, Shalane, after you've heard some of the questions that have come in, kind of where folks are at, what they're thinking about. Any key takeaway that you would leave for this group as they're thinking about their leadership journey? And, a lot of these folks are really focused in on social impact and what does it mean to really drive change in the world. So we'd love if you have any last key insights or pieces of advice for the group.
Ooh, I just think it's to never stop learning. To be honest, the Trevor Noah Foundation is the longest that I've ever been in one kind of job per se. Before this, if you look at my CV, I was a consultant. I jumped around from project to project. I'm a person who enjoys learning new things, and I moved around a lot. And I thought that was going to be my life forever. To be honest, I thought I was going to continue being a consultant. And then when I came to the foundation, because we've evolved so quickly and my role has shifted very quickly, every few years, or every year or so, I feel like my role is completely doing something different. But I'm also constantly learning through the job, right? We work in infrastructure. I didn't know anything about infrastructure before then, but it's more about kind of leaning into new experiences. Just because your organization does one thing doesn't mean that you can't be involved in other interdisciplinary circles. So think about how gender impacts the work that you do, or climate, or technology. I think it's to just be very open to the world and the space, because you never know what might come out of an event. You might meet someone who could potentially be a funder. I think it's just to be open. Continue taking classes, continue going to events, continue going to conferences, continue listening to webinars, podcasts. I know it's a very busy space. There's a lot of content out there, so be very selective, but it's that mindset again, right? I don't know everything, and I don't need or want to know everything, but I'm going to continue incrementally bringing in new information and new people.
That's amazing. Great last word, Shalane, right? Having that growth mindset, I think, is what's going to take us all into having greater impact in the future. So with that, thank you all for joining. Shalane, thank you so much for your time, your insights, your vulnerability and openness and transparency. And as a reminder for those, if you're interested in future webinars, please feel free to go to our website. It's in the messages for Emergent Inquiry Consulting. Register for our newsletter, and we'll send you updates as we're going to have additional and new events. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate it. Bye. Have a lovely day.